Hey all, Siege here, and today I've got another theory I want to discuss with you all regarding the newest quest in game, the Call of the Tempestari. Because of how much it ties in, I'm considering this the next part in the Devil in the Details lore theory, as watching that series will most assuredly give you a better understanding of what I'm proposing in this one. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it first. Now, I've been researching the new quest a fair bit recently, along with the Deadlock Protocol, as the two obviously have a significant tie between them. For those that have not played these quests and don't want to be spoiled, please consider doing that first, as, well, one, things will make much more sense, but two, I think the end of Tempestari is something those really interested in the lore should experience themselves. It's obviously pretty important, and many people in the comments section of my initial playthrough and thoughts video brought up the idea that the Parvus Granum we see at the very end of the quest is not Parvus at all. One of the major things that was mentioned was the fact that after we help Sebagoth complete his mission and retrieve his body, the brief cutscene showing Valaglarios trapped within the Granum Void seems like she's almost purposely keeping her eyes closed in a kind of unnatural way, especially considering the drastic change in her environment, considering she was just on her ship and now she's aimlessly walking around in Granum's Void. I think this part is potentially explained by the most likely presence of one of the hands being on her ship, much like we were able to head into the Void right before the Corpus ship collapsed during the Deadlock Protocol. And it's true, Vala's eyes, when finally opened, do appear to have a familiar look to them, but many of the Corpus seem to exhibit this same type of trait with their eyes, something that might be explained by all the technology they infuse in their bodies. Is that the reason? I don't know. And in a previous video in this series, I mentioned that if in fact the Void and all the powers and abilities it seems to bestow on individuals throughout Warframe come from a sentient consciousness, choosing who it gives these gifts to versus them just showing up coincidentally, well, maybe there is something there in the end. The problem is, I don't think there's enough to really guarantee her eyes are a telltale sign. Bear in mind, the Man on the Wall's eyes have an almost cosmic look to them, with some instances seeming to be almost fiery in nature. Similar to the difference between the normal Void we're typically shown and the color change we see specifically in the Granum Void. The thing that I feel needs some type of clarification, though, is the fact that Parvus is here at all. Why? If we remember from the Deadlock Protocol, Parvus was literally trapped within this void space, presumably locked in time by the powers of Protea, only being able to finally leave due to the actions of the Tenno. So, why exactly would he want to go back in so quickly? If you were trapped in a place like this for literal years, requiring the help of someone else to leave, would you go back? Something I didn't notice in my initial playthrough of the Deadlock Protocol is that Parvus mentions that he has actually been watching us, which I assume to mean both Neff and we the Tenno, as he also claims to have invited us here, insinuating that in essence this whole quest was his idea, and in reality, there's really only one other character who has the consistent ability to influence characters like this, from behind the scenes if you will. Then of course, there's this. Sister. I think it's very apparent. The voice is significantly different from when we originally were confronted by Parvus.
It has been so long since these old eyes beheld another living thing here in the sanctuary. I am Parvus Granum. Thank you for finding me.
And this newest iteration of how he speaks is something absolutely in line with the common trait of the Man on the Wall.
Feeling better, kiddo? I killed him. Isa. Did you now? Is that how you remember it? Yes. Good.
The thing we have to consider, though, is that the Man on the Wall, at least from what we definitively know, appears to people as a doppelganger of themselves. Personally, I'm not sure why that is, but something that interests me about Granum is that his entire claim to fame is in fact the mirror of that aspect of the Man on the Wall. Whereas this is not some type of validation of any kind of connection with the Man on the Wall, it is a noteworthy parallel seen in that character. In fact, not even something specific to the two of them, as Nata and many of the sentients, void creatures in their own rights, are capable of this type of thing. We were never really given any idea as to how Parvus was able to do any of this, and even the business. Someone who appears to have a substantial knowledge set of his own is taken aback when he has become entwined with an intellect that, at least from his speech in Deadlock, seems to be a level far above his own, or at least one he respects highly. Also, I feel like the fact that Parvos utilizes the whole term of endearment thing we've seen so many times before, calling Vala sister, also falls in line with what the Man on the Wall typically attempts to use, calling the Tenno kiddo, calling Entrati little Bengal, not to mention the concept behind using the memory of important individuals, of its targets' former existence, as a kind of buffer in order to make the situation a bit easier to accept. But the question I have is, given that we know the Man on the Wall has now appeared to the Tenno, Albrecht Entrati, Rel, although Rel, to me at least, is still an outlier, there are just some parts of his story that don't make sense. But regardless, even Nata knows of the entity, and she too may have had the same type of encounter, alluded to in the Wrote Below list fight. But does appearing as a twin to most mean it's the only way? I personally don't believe so, and in the previous videos in this series, I show my thought process as to why I think that might not always be the case, as well as who may be the Man on the Wall, at least in disguise, mainly by taking this concept one step further, appearing to certain characters in the Warframe universe as someone else. Potentially realizing manipulation would be easier as someone important from its target's past, much like how Parvos is obviously important to Vala, shown many times during her dialogue. If he can appear to people as a vision of themselves, appearing as someone else shouldn't necessarily be any more difficult, in theory at least. And something else about Parvos that parallels the Man on the Wall, at least in how Albrecht Entrati met him, is the emphasis on hands. During Entrati's cinematic, we see a hand reaching out to him, which seems to have significant connection to the scene at the end of the Rising Tide quest, at least attempting to allude to the idea that the finger that enables void travel within the reliquary drive is related to the Man on the Wall, and curiously enough, Parvos' hand, something he is apparently famous for losing, is a kind of effigy capable of permitting travel to the Granum Void. Although there's no actual proof of the meeting, Parvos certainly likes to mimic the playbook the Man on the Wall uses for a great many things. And it's also entirely possible whoever wrote the song during the Tempestari quest thinks much in the same way that I do, given the line, "There's a man on high with the devil in his eye, in a golden hand, I'm told." Now, is this the golden hand, or is it this? The song continues with, "It can hurt you, it can hold you, he can kick you or console you." We haven't really seen any evidence of Parvos doing any of that aside from him reaching out his hand at the end of the cinematic, but this line does seem to coincide with the actions of the Man on the Wall, sometimes acting like our friend, sometimes acting like a thug, making sure you know that you still owe him. Something I feel lines up with the different dialogue options you can get from him depending on the choices you've made in certain quests. And if you watched my video talking about the lidless eye that Palladino references, and its potential relationship to the quote-unquote eye we see out in the Veil Proxima, which incidentally looks eerily similar to the thing in the background while we were engaging Corpus and Granum Spectres alike with Sevagoth in some unknown plane of existence at the end of Tempestari. Well, it just seems like there are a lot of odd coincidences, potentially too many to just blindly accept them all as coincidences. I mentioned in a previous Devil in the Details theory video that it seemed really odd that Granum has these capabilities, and I may have mistakenly mischaracterized the Granum Void as something different than the typical Void we've experienced on numerous occasions, potentially due to its difference in color, as well as its supposed association with Parvos Granum only. Its color scheme, however, mostly red, is very similar to how the man is portrayed, notable in the Chains of Harrow quest, and that quest somewhat parallels the Deadlock protocol, in that we, the Tenno, were said to have released the Man on the Wall into the system, allowing Rel to finally rest, and we, the Tenno, also were the ones to have released Parvos Granum into the system. Finally, in almost every notable scene with Granum, DE goes out of its way to show you his face, getting pretty close up in a few scenarios. This final scene, however, makes sure that we, the player, cannot see Parvos. You know, sometimes I wonder if all these things are just coincidences, and I'm just reaching due to heavy confirmation bias with a lot of the information I provide. And I have to admit, it really is curious. But then again, actually, if I think about it, Well, I don't think it's curious at all. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video today, and it got you thinking a little bit about the greater aspect of the Call of Tempestari and what impact it has in the Warframe universe. It's true, it was a short quest, and without a lot of context, pretty confusing. But there's a ton of significance within it. In time, I think we're going to find out just how much. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.